Special board meeting of CCWD Water District Board of Directors, Wednesday, May 29th, 2024. Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, would you please call the roll?
Director Underhill,
Here.
Director Ratterman,
Here.
Director Davidson.
Here.
Director Cicada,
Here.
President Thomas.
I am here. And before we go to public comment, I want to welcome Ralph Copeland back to the chambers here.
See, we're glad you're here. We missed you.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to make a speech or anything? Yeah, good for you. Okay, item number 2, public comment. At this time, members of the public may address the board on any non-agendized item. We have a very short agenda today, but a very important one. Do we have any public comment? Public online? Okay. I see faces all over this. That's mostly staff, looks like. Okay. All right. Moving on to item 3, the budget workshop. We have a discussion direction regarding preliminary fiscal year 24-25 operating and capital improvements program CIP budgets. And welcome back, Jeff Meyer. I guess you were here earlier and I missed you.
Well, thank you, President Thomas, and members of the board. It's a pleasure to be back. Are you ready to go into the PowerPoint? PowerPoint, please. I'm going to have to forewarn you. This budget year is a little bit different. The budget preparation is different than past years. If you look through the budget status report, there were a number of changes that I noted, but please have patience. There's basically 3 sections to my presentation. The first section will go over the basics, what went into preparing this budget. Then we'll talk about the operating budget, and then we'll get into the CIP budget. So there's going to be a lot of narrative up front before we get into the numbers. Director Underhill and Director Cicada has heard this last Thursday afternoon. Hopefully they found it helpful to lay out the premise of this. And what we found helpful at that point is to probably allow me to get through the first section before we open it up for questions, especially from the audience, because there's a lot to go over and I want to make sure that I cover everything.
And what I did was I have to take notes so I remember my question. So I just kind of put my finger up and he paused so I could write it to myself. And then he continued and I think it worked really well.
Okay.
Okay, I just have one question before you start off.
Yes.
We have this on our dais here today. We had, looks like this, pretty much the same information in the agenda packet.
That is correct, except for one change.
Okay.
Actually, 2 changes. The one change is on the detail. Director Cicada asked that we include year-to-date numbers on the detail pages. That's all I changed there.
Okay.
All the operating numbers are exactly the same.
Okay, so I have made notes in the agenda packet, so I just wondered if I.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
And then the other thing, there was one additional CIP project that's been added. So the CIP changes have been, are updated within that handout.
And you'll talk about that when you get to that point.
Yes, I will.
Thank you.
And that's just because it was a project that was supposed to be completed this year. It was not able, they were not able to get to it. So it's a carryover into next year. And we're just providing funding into next year. First off, I want to thank all the people who helped put this budget together. Scott Nelson and Kamiko Tashuda from Eide Bailly did a lot of work on this presentation, putting everything together. It was a big help for me as I was coming back. obviously our department heads and Kelly Richards, who is not here today. They were huge in putting this together, and also Michael and I teamed together to be able to review this budget and make sure it meets our standards. So the first thing I want to do okay, is to talk to you about some of the changes we have in the budget this year. As you can see, my creativity isn't always the greatest, so I just titled these a step forward. We're making a leap forward in how we have presented the budget in prior years to how we're presenting it now. And there's a number of factors that go into this. First off, we have a new rate plan in the water and sewer funds. And that rate plan, if you remember back in, it was adopted in September. The key there, especially in the early years, is to focus on eliminating operating deficits, restoring fund balances and reserve levels, and maintaining debt service coverage ratios. That was very important as we looked at that, because the first few years we had structural deficits in water, sewer, and we were concerned about debt service coverage ratios. This year, we're also, next year, we are also creating a hydroelectric fund. And that is to isolate or move out all the expenses and revenues associated with our North Fork project and our New Hogan project. So that is in itself is a large process. So we're going to see that as part of this new budget. And we're also looking at a revised fund structure for water, sewer, and hydro, which will better align our budget with our core functions and increase fiscal transparency. And that's one of our goals here is transparency. So the rate plan. Last year on October 16th, we increased rates. That was for 10 or 9 months out of the year. It was not for actually 8 months because it wasn't for the full year. So that's something I'll show you visually in just a moment. Your amended water rates that you adopted in September called for a 12% increase for water and a 12% increase for sewer, and both of those are effective July 16th of this year. And we'll also go through and show you what our budget would look like if we did not include the rate increase effective July 16th. This is a little hard to see on the screen, but what I wanted to do here is this is straight out of the rate study. If you look at the top 3 lines, that's our base water revenues. That was as of before the rate increase. You can see we have a base fixed charge of about 7 million, R&R base charge about 2.8 million, and then a combined R&R and regular variable revenues of 2.2 million. Of that 2.2 million, about 40,000 of that was money that went to the R&R fund because R&R got both fixed and variable rates. Now, if you look at under the column 2024, remember we didn't have a full year of rate revenue. So the model showed 2,229,000 of additional revenue coming in through the rate increase. Now, if you look over to the next column to the right, that same rate increase jumps up to 2,674,000. The reason for that is now we have a full year of revenue, which we did not prior. And then also right below that, the 12% increase for this coming year is just about 1.8 million in new revenue. So that's one of the things we're taking a look at here. So that shows you what the rate increases were for water and how this factors into our budget. On the sewer side, you can see that the base revenues that we have, rate revenues prior to the rate study, was 6.8, 6.9 million. Of that, 823,000 this year is for last year's rate increase and another 922,000 for this year. So the additional revenue this year from the rate increases in the sewer side is $1,745,000. As I mentioned earlier, we have one of the changes in our budget is the rate structure. The rate increases that we had well, let me step back. Back in 2013, when we created the R&R revenues, those funds, both the water and sewer, went directly into the R&R funds, water R&R and sewer R&R. It bypassed the operating funds completely. It didn't even show up in the operating budget. That has changed with this new budget. The new rate structure, all the rate revenue now goes into the operating fund, water operating and sewer operating. So it's all there. However, we still have a portion of our rates that are going to contribute to our capital program. When I use capital program, I mean CIP program. What your board did back in October is to set the minimum levels of that support going to the CIP. The minimum level of support in the water would be 3.4 million, and for sewer, it's 1.3 million. Those funds will now be pulled out of the regular rate revenue, the operating, and put into those R&R funds. And we're doing that this year. But what I want to do is when you look at the rates, the whole rate revenue, you're going to see a significant increase, but you have to understand that 4.7 million of all those revenues are going to be sent out to the R&R funds to help fund our capital program. And they are restricted, so they're not able to be used for operating. I mentioned we're going to create a hydroelectric fund. This will consolidates all our hydroelectric activities in a single fund, and it better aligns our budget. It separates out the costs so that we can see what hydro is actually what we're spending our money on and what revenues are coming in. But even more importantly on this, and Michael and I have had discussions together on this, also with Cameron Weiss, bond counsel, is that, and our auditor, Brian Nash, and Scott Nelson from Eide Bailey, creating a hydro fund is really going to help us moving forward in having this hydro evolve into what we'd like it to be, because we're going into the relicensing process. And there may be a need to issue debt solely to support that hydro fund and those activities and the relicensing effort. To be able to do that, we need to have a fund that is segregated, has a history showing revenues and expenses, and that's what this fund does. It's very transparent to the auditors and to the lenders because they want to see what we're doing. To be able to pull those funds out and say, oh, looking in the water fund, well, such and 20% belongs here and 40% belongs in sewer. That doesn't work well with the bankers and the lenders. So we're going to creating a hydro fund to enable us to move forward through this relicensing process.
Just a quick question. Was this hydroelectric fund a consensus of opinion from all of, the gentlemen that you
Yes.
mentioned? I mean,
Yeah.
Everybody said, hey, this only makes sense that we do this.
That is correct. And there were several members of your board, and I can't remember who brought it up, but a number of times over the last several years, you're saying, can we have a hydro fund? We need to show that.
Yeah.
Yes, that's our asset. And by doing this, we are showing this is our asset and we're moving forward. So we've moved out the revenues and the expenses in the new hydro fund. The other thing we're doing is looking at our operating deficits and our fund balance and reserve levels. Just one second. Okay. The rate study that was adopted last year, it showed that current water revenues are not sufficient to support water operations. In fact, the gaps that if you remember seeing in the rate revenue showed a gap in the operating. And if we didn't raise rates, the gap would be increasing. What's also happening is it's eating into our reserve levels as well over time. On June 30th, the water fund had about a $3.1 million fund balance. It's down to 2.8 million, but that doesn't tell the whole story. because we just got a significant payment of property tax revenues that came in April. So in March, it was down to 1.8 million. So it fluctuates, but the structural deficit is there. I used the main April numbers because they're the latest, but they're kind of misleading from the prior year. Yes, fund balances go up and down depending upon our expenditures. We have debt service, we have property taxes, a huge boost, but we have been on a negative trend downward on our revenues. And that's why we had to increase the water rates and the sewer rates. Same thing with sewer, although sewer's been different. We were in the hole 1.7 million as of June 30th of last year. Now we're at 900,000 in the hole. Now in March, that was 1.5 million in the hole. So what we're trying to accomplish here is not only just eliminating the structural deficits, but the key here is having sound operating funds in the water and sewer, and also meeting our reserve requirements. Our current reserve requirements show a minimum of $500,000 in our operating reserves. We are going to be coming back and visiting reserve levels next year, along with some of our hydro policies, because we need to develop those. So that's something we're going to be looking at, because it's time to revisit those. But the key here is, the big one is the negative fund balance in sewer. On top of that, the sewer fund owes the water fund about $800,000 based on prior gaps in funding levels. This has been going on for several years. We are now being able to close that gap, and when I get into the debt service, I'll talk about that more later. And finally, on the debt service coverage ratios. Debt service coverage ratio is basically net operating income, revenues less expenses, divided by debt service principal and interest. The goal is 1.25, and that's considered strong by lenders, and it indicates sufficient income to cover debt obligations and can help us qualify for more favorable loan terms, which we have in the past. That's been one of our strengths, along with reserves. Banks love to lend money to people who have money. So it's worked out with us in the past. Now, this is kind of interesting to see, and it took me a while to digest some of the numbers. Here are the debt service coverage ratios for water and sewer going back to 2021. I did not include 24 because we haven't finished the fiscal year. 2025 is a projection based on the budget. So if you look at 2021, our water debt service coverage ratio is 2.92. It increased to 13.03 in 2022. Some of our debt came off the books, so that helped. But it dropped down in 2023 to 1.58. So what happened during those 3 years? Yes, we had some debt come off the books in 2022, but also what happened is PERS made 22% return on their investments in 2020, 2021. What that does is, once that valuation is rolled into our next PERS rates, whether it's UAL or normal cost, since they beat expectations, that meant our contributions came down quite a bit. But also, debt service coverage ratio is based on your balance sheet. And when you look at salaries and benefits on your balance sheet, it does take into account UAL costs. So the auditors adjust it. They don't look at actual salary and benefits. They adjust that salary and benefits based on the deferrals, deferred inflows, deferred outflows. And with all that said and done, our salary costs were actually less than our actuals on the balance sheet. The next year, when PERS lost 7%, it went the other way. Our salaries went up like this on the balance sheet, even though the actuals did not. Actuals basically stayed the same. So remember, your debt service coverage ratio is net operating divided by your debt service. So when we had the spike in salaries and benefits in 2023, because of the PERS valuations, that reduced the amount of money available for debt service coverage ratio. It's projected to go back up to 3.42 next year, and that includes some new debt. So it moves based on our revenues and expenses, but you can see that we're still above our 125 level. This year in 2024 was going to be a critical year for us. I don't know where we stand on debt service coverage ratio at this point because we haven't closed out the year. However, one of the things that Habib did within the rate model is if we need to do it, we can take $500,000 out of our rate stabilization fund, shift it over into the water fund to cover any funding gaps. If we do not need that, that rate stabilization fund can be used for future years. For sewer, we're much better off in sewer. Even at its lowest, it was 7.53. So the debt service coverage ratio is not an issue in the sewer fund. Yes, sir.
Quick question before we leave this slide. If you were to slide a 2024 column in there based on your predictions, and just looking forward, there's not that many days left in the fiscal year. What would those numbers look like?
Honestly, Director Rademan, I don't know, because again, it's off the balance sheet.
Okay.
And a lot of that has to do with the PERS and their valuations. So I'm just strictly looking at 2025 on the budget.
Okay.
There's just too many moving parts at this point, but I think we're going to be healthy. I know for sure we'll be there on sewer. Water will be a little bit close, and that's why Habib offered up the use of those reserves, and that kept us, his projection was 128 for this year, 23, 24.
In water.
In water.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, one of the things I talked about was fund balances. And this is a new way of laying out how we look at our budget. The first column on the left is the projected balance in the water operating fund at June 30th, 2024, 2.6 million. We have 20.8 million in revenues, 20 million in expenses. We transfer in 2.4 million, and then we transfer out 3.46 million. That transfer out is money that's going to the capital program. It's that base level of 3.4 million that I referenced earlier, plus an additional $60,000 that we want to apply towards our capital funding. And so the projected balance at the end of that time frame is a little under 2.3 million. So we're still trending downwards a little bit, but we anticipate by end of 25, 26, where the water and sewer funds should be stabilized. The interest reserve fund, you can see we've got some budgeted revenues going in there, and that's our property tax apportionment to the special project fund. And then on the CIP side, this is, and I apologize, I did not update this chart. It should be 15.2 million because of the most recent CIP. I've got it figured out in the others, but you can see where our funding comes for our CIP budgets. We have transfer in of 3.46 million. We have debts, capital R&R of a little over 3.1 million. The loan, CIP loan, 9.8 million. And we'll get into the uses of that in just a moment. Expansion fund of 336,000 and grant funds of 1.7 million. This is a little bit of a visualization of how our funds are set up that are contributing to our operating budget. And you can see beginning and ending balance. This is something that we're going to continue to show as we move forward. Sewer, on the other hand, started out in a negative 900,000. That's where I anticipate us being by the end of this year. It has budgeted revenues of 9.6 million, budget expense 8.2, transfers in, and that's mainly for debt service because our R&R funds cover debt service. And then the transfers out of 2 million. Our minimum level of funding for our sewer CIP is 1.3 million, but we have a big gap in our funding for sewer, especially if we don't get a grant for Arnold, the secondary clarifier. So what we're trying to do is give sewer CIP some additional funds to complete projects. But, and I just want to show one more number. If you look at that projected year-end deficit for the sewer operating fund of 420,000 in the hole, that's a lot better than 900,000. We've been able to whittle away this. Michael and I had a discussion about this, and I'll have to say Michael won, but it was because it was logical. And we had enough money in extra funds to pay down make that negative fund balance balanced, per se, go to zero. But we also looked at different things that were part of the sewer fund. We had the sewer operating is one interest, one factor. Sewer capital is another factor. The sewer loan from water to sewer is another factor that came into the equation, and also the shortfall in sewer capital. So what we decided to do is take a portion of the funds, the excess revenues over expenditures, apply them to the negative fund balance, apply them to capital, and apply them to pay down the loan to water sewer, the water loan to sewer. The way it's currently set up at about $78,000 a year in principal and interest, it would have taken until 2038 to pay off that loan. We're going to be able to pay that down quicker because we want to get positive in both the fund balance and get rid of that loan. So these are three of the factors that came into what we could do with some of these excess revenues. Because remember, the rate study predicted excess revenues because we had huge funding gaps. We had a negative over 1.5 million negative sewer operating fund. We had to address that. We had the structural issue. We had the loan. So there's a number of factors here. And so we allocated money to each of those four needs: the operating budget, the capital budget, the negative fund balance, and the loan to the water fund. You can also see here too our use of funds. We have in our CIP, which is 9.7 million. We have R&R funds, CIP waste loan, a CIP sewer loan of 4.5. We use a La Quintana expansion fund for 270, Copper Cove expansion a little over 460, and 2.5 million in grant funds. So we're monitoring not only the fund balance in the operating fund, but all these other expansion funds. And all those expansion funds are being used to fund our capital projects in certain areas. So working with operations and working with engineers projecting a 5-year budget, we have to look at the funding sources for all of those, and we have to balance out that. That's why we're drawing from different sources, whether it be grants, the loan, R&R, or expansion funds. And one more slide here, and then I'll take a pause. The hydro fund, as I mentioned, we pulled the expenditures out, which is about $1.2 million, and I'll get into the detail on that a little bit later. Budgeted revenues, 1.7 million. So we actually have a revenues over expenditures by about $500,000. We do not have policies for the hydro fund at this point. So what we just decided to do, the group of us, is leave that money there as a projected fund balance until your board adopts policies for the hydro fund, adopts policies regarding uses of fund, adopts policies regarding reserve levels, and what we're going to be using this fund for. So right now, we're not showing any uses of that $500,000. It could be saved for future debt service. It could be saved for a number of issues, but your board is going to have that discussion in July and August. So we'll be coming back with you on that. We'll be working with the auditors. Cam Wiest, who's done a number of these things, is going to be helping us with the policies. and Ide Bailey as well. So I'm going to pause at this point and ask if there's any questions.
Jump in there, somebody. Any questions?
The last meetings.
Yeah, Jeff, I have one, quick one on, under this, hydro fund balance sheet, that one that's
Yes.
up there. I saw, looking deeper into this, staff report, like this 1.241 million of operating hydro expenses, budget expenses, and there was a lot of references to labor or salary expenses and stuff associated with operating the hydro. Can you explain a little bit about who are those people? What are they doing?
Certainly. Now, this is the relicensing effort. So what we're looking at is, right now, we're looking at a portion of John Coleman's time in water resources.
Okay.
But since we don't have an estimate of my time nor Michael's time, we will be keeping track. We have a project number we're going to be using, and people can keep track of their time, so it's more actuals
Okay.
as we go through this.
And without getting into too much detail on that point, I think we are also going to try to get more reimbursement for those costs. So hopefully this dollar amount, the amount we're reimbursed for, will hopefully go up, which would increase the, the revenue from the hydro fund.
Okay, well, I'm sure that I can anticipate the answer to this question, but if you're allocating a certain amount of your time, Michael's time, John Coleman's time to this, it'll be deducted from the usual and customary salary consideration.
It will be shifting from water sewer into hydro.
Right, okay. Right.
Yes, sir.
I have more of a comment than a question. I certainly would have liked to seen a policy, or us creating a policy while this budget was being a policy for the hydro fund, while this budget was being proposed. I mean, this isn't the first time that staff and you and all your experts have realized suddenly that we're going to have another fund with an extra $500,000 in it at the end of the fiscal year, and no policy on its use. We're going to put this off till July or August and start sticking money into this fund with no policy. That just seems backwards. Is there an idea? Do we have, is that something that can be pushed forward a little bit?
Well, I think part of it is we just need to work with, we need to be very deliberate about how we do this to make sure that we're not jeopardizing any of our existing debt covenants in the water and sewer funds, or as we shift money out of those funds. So we're working with Cam on that right now, and it's not, I agree, it would have been ideal to have it in advance, but I also don't want to rush a policy back until we make sure we have all of those, all of that cleared, and we're not, we're not missing anything on those fronts. So we're not moving this money. It's just a surplus in the hydro fund for now. The purpose of that is to, subsidize water and sewer. So it will, we need to make sure we have a healthy hydro fund, but we also need to make sure we're bringing money from the hydro fund into water and sewer, where we have a shortfall on infrastructure, which is the point of those projects.
It still seems backwards. I mean, and I think everyone here can agree that would be best to have it. Is there a way to put a policy in effect with I'm asking if we can do this, and we can change the policy. This board can change the policy in July or August if we put a policy in place now, and if could on their July 12th or our June 12th meeting, when this budget comes before us for a vote, is it possible to put some sort of a policy, let's say a placeholder policy?
Why don't we take a look at that after offline and
Yeah.
get back to you on that. I don't know that it benefits us to do that, but why don't we dig into it and see what we can come up with?
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Okay.
All right, thanks.
I
Exactly.
had a little comment. And I don't really think we need to go into a lot of this, but when you first started, Jeff, you used the word transparency. And you said you wanted to make sure that everything about this new system was transparent. So you kind of alluded to the fact that we weren't transparent before.
No, it's increased, yeah. And actually, there's one more slide that I
Oh.
missed, and this will help. Because what we're doing is right now we have a water fund number 300. We have a sewer fund 500. But we also have the 100 series of funds. We had the 101 account.
Right, right.
Which everything was kind of dumped into there unless we knew it was water and sewer. The auditors didn't like that. That didn't make it transparent. It was just separated out at the end of the year. Same way with our interest reserve account, our admin services, our admin building fund, our water and sewer, R&R funds were all in the 100 series. So what we're going to be doing now, and we're working with internally, Patty's helping us, Michael's looking at, myself, and the auditors are working through this. Every fund that we have related to water is going to be in the 300 series. Whether it's interest reserve, building admin, whether it's our R&R funds or CIP loans, and all our expansion funds, it'll all be 300. So you can take a look at that and know everything in there is water. Same way with sewer is going to be 500. Hydro is going to be 400. So what we're doing is you just look at one place, one budget for everything in hydro. Same way with water and same way with sewer. Years ago, we weren't really pulling apart all these budgets and showing them. We were doing it in the financial statements, we were doing it internally, but as far as the budget document, it was a little bit different. It's more of a summary. Now everything is focused on water, supporting water, sewer supporting sewer, and hydro supporting sewer. And that's why we're working through our chart of accounts, our fund numbers, to be able to create some more transparency. So somebody says, hey, Jeff, how much was in the hydro fund? I can run the report, everything is there, knowing that those are the only costs associated with the relicensing and our hydro project. Same with water and sewer.
But I don't think that, we're not trying to imply though that we weren't
Well,
transparent.
that's,
before.
that's
We
what
go,
you can
No.
kind of,
we go through the budget line by line and
Right.
account by account every year. So we always prioritize transparency, as the strategic plan clearly says, that's a high priority. But so as we look at when we do make changes, doing it in a way that increases transparency
Yeah.
is part of our charge, from the board and under the strategic plan.
Better choice of words. Thank you.
Director Cicada, go ahead.
Okay, so a couple of comments. Transparency might be the right word, but it also just means that it's easier in one place to look at the information you're trying to find. And building on it is that it's not like we didn't have any transparency.
Yeah.
But the other comment I want to make is with what Scott brought up, I believe I brought up wanting the policy as well. At the finance meeting, I mentioned it, that we should have some kind of policy. If that 507,000 is going to be sitting over there, the policy should state it sits there until at which time you can determine if we're following all the debt rule requirements or whatever it was that, Michael just said,
Mhm.
and then decide where it goes, whether it stays to offset water and whatnot, or just go to CIP, that kind of a thing. So I just am supporting what he says, because I was thinking that we should have something, even if it's a temporary one-line sentence.
Hopefully we can see the results of your consultation about this item on our June 12th meeting.
And it doesn't only affect the 500,000 balance that will be in at the end. It affects all the expenses that are in it that are going to
Yeah.
be spent during the fiscal year.
Yeah.
And how they can be spent based on on policy.
Understood.
Okay, and Michael, you mentioned when I asked about salaries and stuff, you mentioned the internal staff salaries, but how about guys like John Devine, his expenses? Is that going to go in to this also?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
And I'll dig into that a little bit deeper once we get into the detail on the hydro fund.
Okay. Right. Any further questions before we go ahead? Nope.
Any
Okay.
questions? Online? Okay.
We've taken a little breather here on this first section. Does anybody online wish to ask a question of Jeff at this time? Okay, Jeff, proceed.
Okay. Now we'll get into the numbers. This is similar to the handouts that you have. This particular schedule that we shows you the preliminary budget for water, sewer, hydro, and the total for all three funds combined and our adopted budget for 23-24. As you can tell, I'm just going to jump to the bottom line. The water fund will show a balance of a little over $8,000 at year end projected. The sewer, 480,000. 470,000 of that is projected to go towards paying down that negative fund balance. That's what I mentioned as competing interest in the sewer fund. And the hydro fund, the 504,000. All combined, we have a little under $1 million of revenue over expenses, but again, the combination of sewer and hydro and sewer, I would discount that because even at the end of the year, we're still going to have be in the hole of over $400,000. So that's work in progress.
Where is that negative figure, 400,000?
It's under the fund balance, back on slide 11. The top line, top row, I should say. Where we start at is a negative 900,000.
Okay, got it. We're being very, very serious about all this, but it occurs to me that if we're going to be in the hole on anything, it's appropriate that it's on sewer.
Did a drop in the bucket?
Touche. Give her a smile. I've earned budget discussions.
On the left-hand side, you can see where our revenues are coming from and the water operating, 72% are operating revenues, which is predominantly rate revenues. Non-operating revenues of property taxes and reimbursements and such, and transfers in. That's basically money coming in for debt service and money coming in from the CIP funds that help pay back the operating fund for the time and effort our employees are doing on the projects themselves.
So tell me quickly, what percentage are transferred in? I mean, you're going by CIP project, is that, and then this is just a accumulation of.
What you look at, the most of that is coming in for debt service. Because the money in debt service falls into our capital R&R fund. We pay our debt out of the water operating fund, so we have to move money over to that fund to pay for that debt. The other component, and I think it's about $600,000 total, somewhere in there, of the amount of money going from the CIP projects. Such as in this case, the big project we're going to be having is Jenny Lynn AB transmission. There's going to have to be a lot of support for that project, from inspectors' time, from the backup for the people, the water distribution workers to manage that, the engineers and everybody else, and all the other projects. They fill out time cards with their project numbers, and that's how we track their time. On the outflows or our expenditures, it's kind of pretty close between salaries and benefits and service and supplies in that 30% range. Capital outlay is 1.6 million, about 5%. Debt service, you can see that's the $3.5 million that we have in debt service. Some of that is reimbursed from the R&R funds. Some is just funded by operating. Our back-on loans are not funded by the R&R funds. Our New Hogan loan, which is getting towards the end, is not funded by the R&R funds. And then transfers out for capital, 5.46 million. So let's take a look at the water fund. The adopted budget for last year or this current year shows a negative of $934,000 of revenues less expenditures. We were in the hole, and that was, clearly identified in the rate study. We're moving things around. We're turning things around this upcoming year. We're looking to basically have a balanced budget. Operating revenues have gone up, and non-operating revenues and transfers non-operating revenues have gone down. That is a relationship, a one-to-one relationship to the money that used to come in for the hydro funds that are now went into water and sewer, that is now going into the hydro fund. There are two sources of revenues that occur in the hydro fund that we're pulling out. One is the North Fork revenue from the North Fork project. The other is New Hogan. So we have hydro revenues coming in. We also get reimbursed by NCPA and MID for the FERC and water rights licenses we have to pay to the state and the federal for those projects. NCPA pays us 100%. MID is 80%, but the fees on New Hogan are much less than they are for the North Fork project. So those are the two sources of revenues, and those fall under the non-operating funds. Operating funds are basically what revenues do we get are related to our operations of water, rates, irrigation, new account establishment fees, those type of operating funds. If you're looking at interest income, the rental income on our cell tower leases, our property tax money, those are non-operating revenues. And that's what falls into that category. If we look at here, salaries and benefits did go up a little bit. Service and supplies went down. Part of that can be attributed to the fact that our CPPA rates have gone down, which is finally some good news there. Capital outlay went up quite a bit. 393,000 of that is the O'Dowd's Landing fuel break project. We put it in capital outlay, and that's 100% grant funded. So even though it went up that 390,000, revenue is coming up that much as well. And debt service has dropped a little bit, and we have transfers out for capital projects. We have an additional 60,000 that's going to our water CIP. And just as a footnote here, on line number 9, that's capital outlay. Line number 11, transfers out, is capital projects. So when I talk about CIP, it's capital projects. When I talk about the operating budget for equipment that we purchase, that's capital outlay.
Jeff, line by line you're talking about here, I'd like to direct you to line number 5. Under preliminary budget, you got 23,526,836. And then the next slide shows total water inflows of 23,171,836. Why is there a differential there?
I'm sorry, the operating revenue.
The total sources on line number 5.
Yes.
Under the preliminary budget.
Honestly, I think that's a typo because we have to type that number in on the blue box. My fault.
Okay, so it should be the same.
Yes.
Don't let it happen again.
Yes, sir. It's a good catch. What President Thomas was referring to is this next slide showing you, it's a pie chart showing you where the revenues are coming from and the expenses. So you can see the largest portion of revenues is our operating revenues. Next largest is non-op revenues, property tax and such, and transfers in.
Both of the top boxes are wrong.
Yeah,
And they were wrong on the previous slide too.
Like he makes these charts and then we make any change to the spreadsheet.
yeah,
You should update, but if you have to hand enter it.
yeah. I wish it was auto-populated, but it is not.
Okay, well, I thought that there was an explanation and the one you gave is satisfactory. So,
I was surprised that wasn't addressed last week.
because I wasn't here.
Jeff puts things like that in there from time to time just to make sure you're reading it back.
I'm-
closely.
There we go.
Nicely done, President Thomas.
I go over it pretty carefully.
That you do. Any questions on water?
I'll jump in real quick and just say, I have questions pertaining to those green sheets that I have. So should we wait till the presentation's all done? I don't know how people are going to be able to refer to them because not everybody has a copy of
We
it.
don't have it. Yeah.
But I do have it on a flash drive that I could give if you don't.
Or is that something we could, do you want to get into that level of detail afterwards?
Mm,
And go
there's-
offline?
No, I think, anyhow, we'll just
Sure.
wait. And if you find that it should be at a certain point, we'll talk about it. How about that?
And
After all this.
just as a footnote, as soon as I have the PowerPoint done, I do have a PDF version of the budget handout that you had that showed the detailed numbers.
Okay.
So
good.
we can show
So
that.
we might
for
be able
water
to
and sewer.
go there like that.
Yeah.
It's really, I'm just gonna be asked for some narrative, reasons on some things, that's all. So,
Okay, moving on.
Wastewater budget summary. This is very similar to what you saw in water. The increase in operating revenues is due to the rate increase. We are down in operating revenues because the portion of those revenues coming into for the hydro, the North Fork, the New Hogan, and the reimbursements also come out of the sewer budget as well. We have, so there's 10.6 million in projected revenues and uses of 10.1 million. That includes salaries and benefits, which is pretty close to where we were on the last year. We did experience a 12% increase in medical insurance costs this year. The rate model anticipated 5%. So we're a little off on that. Service and supplies went up slightly. Capital outlay did go down. Debt service went up. And part of that is repaying the loan from the sewer fund to the water fund faster than what we anticipated. And I've got a slide for debt service. I want to get that loan off the books. And that's one of the 4 things we were looking at, how to use some of that surplus. And paying off that loan faster is much better. Plus, it helps the water fund too.
Which loan was that? Excuse me.
Pardon me?
What loan you want to pay off?
This is the loan the water fund made to the sewer fund to cover its ongoing deficits.
Got it.
And finally, transfers out for capital projects, $2 million. That's 700,000 above the 1.3 million minimum. But we have to understand too, that sometimes our capital program has fluctuating needs and we need to have that flexibility to increase it. And I'm sure my numbers are off. No,
No, they're perfect.
see, another drop in the bucket. Here, operating revenues take a significant percentage of our funding for our sewer program. And that's why this really points out the fact that our revenues, our sewer revenues are so critical to funding this program because we don't have a lot of other revenues coming in. Salaries and benefits are about 35% of our budget. Services supplies 28%. You can see transfers out for capital, 20%. 14% goes to debt service and a small number to capital outlay. On the hydro fund, this kind of breaks it out a little bit easier so you can see the revenues, which I explained were the North Fork and New Hogan revenues and reimbursements to the tune of $1.75 million. On the expenditure side, salaries and benefits, we're looking at about 150,000. Service and supplies. This is where we pay for our permits, FERC permits, license, and all it, and the state fees for our water rights. And so that is a huge chunk of this. The other chunk is the legal and professional services that we will be using this year through this relicensing process. And that, President Thomas, is what you're talking about, John Devine. He falls into that services and supplies category.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, ma'am.
What percentage was increased in our permits, our state and federal?
Just 1 second. Federal and dam. We actually kept that the same,
Oh,
but state water rights went up about 27,000. And I think the reason we kept the federal and admin, we may have over budgeted for it this year. But yes, that is a big chunk of it. And then we have a significant amount of money for the North Fork project relicensing, about 230,000 in there. And then a good chunk of money in our our legal side. But just to give you an indication, this isn't all the FERC side of it. Our federal dam and admin fees budget for next year is 700,000 and 112,000 for our state water rights fees. Yes. And here's a pie chart showing the different funding sources. Actually, it's just one non-operating. Service and supplies is going to be about 88% of our expenditure budget, 12% from our salaries and benefits. And honestly, this is our first year of associate tracking our cost. This will be our first year. So this is our best estimate. It may go up, it may go down. We'll know more at the end of the year with people tracking their time. Yes, sir.
And whose salaries do you anticipate this 153 represent a percentage of which positions?
Right now, we're looking at a large portion of John Coleman's salaries and benefits. Michael and I, we did not include our time for this estimate at this point. So it's about
That,
Why is that?
It's gonna go up over time, so we'll continue to develop that.
John, would you like to defend yourself?
I fully support.
Okay.
But Michael, I can see your time going in here quite a bit this year. But in this 153 represents more of water resources than management?
Right.
Okay.
We'll take another look at it.
And honestly, as I said, we're just starting to get into this process and we're tracking our time, so we'll not have better. But right now for this year, there is no hydro fund, so we can't charge any dollars to it. We'll be charging next year.
Well, that's what I'm talking about. This budget is what we're.
Yeah, oh, yes. There's going to be a project number where anybody who is authorized to work on that project can track their time. And we do it through the payroll system. And when you enter it into your time cards, it automatically, at the end of that pay period, shows you how much time, salaries and benefits were associated to that project.
And is that payroll and pay card or time card system, can you take portions of a day, hours of a day, third of a
Yes.
day, or? Okay.
Yeah, so if you're 8 hours and you say 2 hours is hydro, you put in there 2 hours for that, the rest 6 regular.
Gotcha.
So it's down to hours, half hours and so forth.
Okay, but prior to the establishment of this hydro fund, I don't know, my recollection is that we were kind of depending on the, what, 4 million or so that we've got in that dedicated fund to,
I thought it was 6.
Well, so there's different, I mean, we have revenue to offset the vast majority of those expenses, and then we have a water resources and for relicensing reserve that's a little over 5 million. So
okay. So we won't, we
it
won't
doesn't
be,
impact the rest of the budget. Either way.
it doesn't impact what?
It doesn't impact the rest of the operating budget either way. We would
Yeah.
either find, additional funds for reimbursement or draw from that reserve if we had to.
Okay, so, but the plan is to not draw from that reserve until need be.
Eventually.
Yes,
Okay. All right,
and that's part of the policy discussion too.
okay, good.
Okay. Here is a layout of the budget by department. And it's broken down, starting with board of directors, general management, admin services, and all the way down. And I pulled out debt service separately from non-departmental. It's broken out salaries and benefits, service supplies, everything you've seen in this presentation. And so you can see a significant, there's been some significant increases, and we'll get into that when we get into the individual ones. But I think part of some of the key stressors on our budget is our third-party processing fees for our online credit cards. That's gone up significantly because we didn't have much of a track record when we put together this year's budget. That's part of the budget increase for admin services in a full year for other, software products. Engineering, Mark is going to come up and explain a little bit later about the work that he's doing, the wastewater ordinance update, and some master plan updates are included in this as well. Utilities has gone up a bit, and then that's also a component of the additional costs we see in capital outlay. One of those is a generator match for our generator replacement that didn't take place this year, but will for next year. And non-departmental retiree health has been an issue, and so is PERS. PERS costs have gone up this year, or should I say for next year. And when you're looking at salaries and benefits, the next page of your slide presentation, 23, goes through and lays out the different line items that go into salaries and benefits. In non-departmental, this is kind of, I just wanted to draw this to your attention, or draw your attention to this number. Down at the bottom where it says CalPERS UAL for $396,000. PERS charges us 2 fees. One is our normal cost. They give you a percentage based on actual salary for that month. You cut a check based on that percentage based on the plan. Because we have 3 plans. We have the miscellaneous tier 2, and PEPRA. Miscellaneous tier 2 and PEPRA are not as rich in benefits as miscellaneous is, because that was part of what Jerry Brown did back in 2013. So we have percentages for that. UAL, on the other hand, is they give us a dollar amount. If you dig deep in the valuations, you can see how much of that UAL, and miscellaneous UAL is the most expensive one. You can see how much is for current employees and how much is for current retirees. The portion for current retirees is $396,000 for next year. And we prepay it and gain by July 31st and get a 3% discount on that. I don't think it's right to saddle the individual departments with the cost of retirees. So what we've done is separated it out, but those other numbers across the board shows you how much is actually for current employees. And it's about $250,000 for current employees. So that's spread based on formulas we worked out to apportion it to the individual departments. Any questions on this slide?
Where can I find that $250,000 figure? You mentioned that the current cost for current employees is 250.
I basically subtracted 395,000 from 644,000.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just
45.
guesstimated, but close.
Estimated, yeah. Okay. Capital outlay. As usual, we'll have vehicles here for new and replacement vehicles. We had a lengthy discussion about this in the finance committee, and I know Damon has been before your board in the past to talking about the replacement of vehicles and the strategy involved. And I just want to throw out one date for everybody to remember, 2027. That's when CARB says we have to be purchasing electric vehicles. So the goal here, and Damon, please correct me if I'm missing something. The goal here is to make sure that we have the newest possible trucks in our fleet by the time 2027 rolls around. We don't want older trucks. So we're rolling off some of our older trucks now to be able to position ourselves for that. Plus, the trade-in value for those trucks right now is at an all-time high. If we wait a year, the trade-in value may not be as much. So Damon, and working with Enterprise and going through Mike Crank and all their work, this is how they figured out what's the best way to position us for not only minimizing our costs now, because we can get good trade-in values of the older ones, but also position ourselves for 2027.
What is the effect? I mean, we can't be the only district that's had a strategy like that. You know, what's the availability of these vehicles, and you know, it seemed to me that the cost is gonna be driven up.
So the cost was starting to go up a couple of years back. So we actually have seen those costs change over time. So that's already baked into the pie now. That said, the government incentives aren't what they used to be, but they're still there. The current objective for the enterprise program is it's a 21 vehicle turnover. So we essentially this year we have 2019 vehicles that we own. And so we will sell those through enterprise, and we'll take the revenue from those sales and we'll pay down the overall cost associated with now leasing to own right around 40 vehicles. Excuse me. So once we do that, the net change is about 17 grand. It would be a cost to us of about 17 grand for this fiscal to get 21 vehicles essentially and sell all of our 10 2019s and replace all of those. So we would basically get 10 vehicles younger, if you will, in preparation for 2027.
Did we ever do anything to prove that the leasing program is an economic benefit to us?
We
Yeah.
have in a few different ways over the years. I'm always happy to do it again. One telltale sign in this actual budget is if you look at fuel and expenses associated with vehicles, it's actually the budget request is less than last year's, and that's due to the fuel efficiencies that we're seeing from operating these trucks. But happy to do it again at some point. Yeah, whenever we need to do it.
Kelly Gerkensmeyer has an electric vehicle. Can we get any credit for that?
Maybe one day.
Okay. I want to warn you that we need to take a break here in a few minutes, but can we pick a
We're
spot?
almost through this portion.
Okay, thank you.
The items, the rest of the items you can see here are an asphalt roller, water truck, snow plows, tow behind air compressor and jackhammer for West Point, which they don't have theirs if they need one. It's got to be towed all the way up from here. Ground penetrating radar kit, which really helps the maintenance crews. Line locators are similar.
Yeah, really. I mean, a lot of what you see on this list for capital outlay for operations are essentially replacement items of existing equipment that we've used over the years and some additions. Like, so with, in the case of snow plows, we have 2 snow plows that are attachments for service trucks. This would allow us to have 4. So then we can deploy a collections worker and a construction crew member. While we all already have distribution crews out in the field, it actually allows us to plow access roads to our infrastructure more quickly. Asphalt roller, water truck, these are 2 items that we're always renting. So whether it be working on a road working on a yard, working, at a pump station, what have you. We generally will need a water truck, as you can imagine, and oftentimes we need asphalt. And then like Jeff said, tow behind air compressor for West Point. West Point currently doesn't have any of those tools. So it would be nice not to have to share. This allows our crews down in Rancho and over in the past to keep doing what they're doing with air compressor and jackhammer while we have crew in West Point doing work. And then you can see hydrant replacements. This is really trying to get us back to the kind of in consideration of the discussion at the last full board meeting about fire hydrants and ISO, where we at. This is an effort to get us kind of there to no hydrants out of service. And then we have the critical facility generator replacement, 25% match, which is a requirement through FEMA. And the district currently has been awarded those funds. So this would be the year that we would then have to illustrate our match to the feds.
Sure, go ahead.
Should we start purchasing tow behind diesel generators for looking forward to 27, 28, when we have to start purchasing electric trucks?
We only have a couple, so we very well could. One thing that's baked into the request for operations this year is an assessment for clean vehicles. How do we deploy? What are we going to do? What is CCWD going to do throughout the county? Somebody help us out.
Mm-hmm.
And I think through that study, if we're successful and we're able to push that study forward, that will help tell us what we're going to do. And we could very well end up requesting more than just a couple trailer mounted generators for charging stations. Yeah,
Charging station.
right. It is. It's a,
Well, that's
it's
what
a
the generators are
radical-
for, because there's no charging stations to get the vehicles back home. Go to
Exactly.
West Point, go to
Right.
Arnold, go
Right.
up to Camp Connell,
They're actually making.
do the
tow-
work for the day. How the hell they get home?
Just
You,
go-
you can actually tow in or
downhill.
charge while you tow.
Okay.
You just run the generator while you're towing it and
And-
charge it for all of your.
It makes no sense.
Just a full circle going down the road.
And it's.
You know, the gal from PG&E basically said she expects the utilities to charge during the day because there isn't enough electricity at night.
Is that carbon neutral when you have an electric vehicle towing a diesel and the diesel generator is running?
Yeah, so I'm sure you guys have heard what the common thing that I continue to hear is nobody's telling you have to buy these vehicles. And if you ultimately end up having to do so, you just operate two fleets. You have your gas powered, diesel powered fleet, and you have your electric fleet. And if the electric rig can't figure it out, then you just bring your, so it's.
Yeah,
How do we buy
that's
two?
cost neutral as well, right?
Yes, right.
This is the second water truck, right?
No, we actually, so we actually did, I would say 3 years ago, the district did have a request in for a water truck and ended up not ultimately buying a water truck. We couldn't find one that was worth the cost. So this is kind of a refresh of that request.
Okay, Director Cicada has.
My turn. So because you just mentioned the water truck, I'm just kind of curious. So it must have been budgeted. What happened to that budgeted money if we didn't buy that truck? Curious, did it go somewhere else or?
Yes, it rolled into your favorite vehicle, actually.
The
The
boom.
boom
money that-
truck.
the money that was budgeted in
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So back to this list I'm looking at, were these items included in our cost of service study? So would it be in,
Dollar amount for capital outlay, though, probably.
A little bit low, yes. And one of the
so
reasons,
that's important.
yes, it is. And one of the reasons for that is the Dow Landing's fuel rate was not
Okay,
included.
so-
in it.
I don't need that detail at the moment, but
Sure.
are you saying that the total of these, so this total cost of the 1.6, that figure was in our rate study model,
Not that amount.
that cost of service?
We'd have to
Higher or
check it
lower?
what the exact dollar amount is, but we did we did project forward a capital outlay expenditure every year.
Of
Yeah.
some kind?
Yes,
But I would really like to know that you're staying within whatever that in your cost of service study to make sure you use that dollar amount. And if it's lower, let us know. If it's higher, let us know. And, just to help us get an idea of what direction we're going in based on the cost of service.
Sure.
The, okay, that's really all I had for that particular.
I want to follow up with one comment, and I know, excuse me for interrupting here. I read an article this morning about the EV movement. And there's one thing that's really going to hold them back: copper. There's not enough copper in the world to be able to supply everything they need for all these electric vehicles and everything else. And they said the average time it takes to plan and get a copper plant online is a minimum of 10 years. So in addition to not having everything in place, you don't have enough copper. And they said, you know what? It's actually less of a burden on the environment if you use hybrid vehicles and not total electric vehicles. So there's just so many challenges to be able to implement this process. And I think Damon and his group is smart. Let's load up on younger vehicles before we even get to that point.
That's
And
just gonna be one of those things that we're just gonna have to say no.
Yeah.
I mean, just gonna say, come get us. You know, you win, come get us.
Fines,
I'm
David,
serious. I mean,
fines will be.
you know, I mean, we're just gonna have to say no.
I did have one more question on the water truck. Do we have staff that can drive it, or are they gonna have to be trained and certified to drive that water truck?
We have,
Not like an additional cost. is it?
we have staff that can drive the water.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Yep.
Now,
You know-
that section.
Well, getting back to the electric vehicle thing, we gotta throw a number at it. I mean, we gotta throw a number at it, a realistic number. We're talking charging stations at every facility, correct? We gotta be able to put that forward, put that out there, and then explain to, you know, our ratepayers, hey, this could happen. If we comply with this law, this is gonna happen,
Yes.
you know, because it's gonna be $20 million.
Yeah, part of the goal is through this fiscal year, the beginning of this fiscal year, we can work with a group that will basically provide us a breakdown and a recommendation of where to put charging stations throughout the county for our infrastructure and how many, and then scale it. So just to your point, okay, well, do we want to charge every utility vehicle here in preparation for an emergency? So
Just think of the power in coming to San Andreas, probably because you're gonna have the county vehicles,
right,
you're gonna have the
Yes.
school, the high school.
yeah,
You're gonna have all that power load
yes.
and they don't have the infrastructure for it.
Correct. And so it's public information. PG&E will tell you what the load constraint is for whatever part of the grid you want to investigate. And currently, where we are currently, there's zero capacity for any additional.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. They brought it up at that
Right.
Aqua a few years back. It's like we may have to go buy other property.
Yes. Or we could charge all the vehicles in West Point, and then we can meet and carpool up to West Point to pick up district vehicles and then drive them up to.
Is it possible? I mean, because it's really obvious, it's not gonna be, infrastructure's not gonna be there. And I would be one to say, let's not buy these vehicles and take our chances for them to say, well, we're gonna close you down. Oh, really? How's that gonna work? You know what I'm saying? And I think we could prove, okay, we can't do this because we can't get the electricity chargers in for emergencies or what have you. I'm just wondering why.
I think we're overstating how big of a factor that is in this decision. There's a lot of reasons why we're replacing vehicles and benefiting from a younger fleet. That's one, I would call it a relatively small factor. We're not doing this. This is not driven by, gaming the EV, the clean fleets rule. That's one consideration, but there's lots of other reasons why it makes sense for us to have a younger fleet.
Well, that's definitely, but I think the thing is, we just started talking about something that's not really on topic about electric
Right.
vehicles. What's happening?
Just to bring it back to the capital outlay request, give us this year because we own these 2019s here within a month. And then allow us to actually push this program through where we sell them and we take those sales and we're able to push it into the program. And then we can report out on that this upcoming fiscal year, because next year you will have vehicles that will own also. So this
Yeah,
is,
we're at that point.
yeah, so this, and maybe then you have that opportunity to make that choice. But this year, I think it would be, we're 5 years, those 2019s are 6 years away from, that time frame. And so they're going to be rode hard. They're going to be beat up. Yeah.
Okay, Can I ask some specific questions about ground, no, these line locators, a replacement of a line locator? And let me give you a little background. I recently requested an engineer from California Telephone to meet me out on the ranch to locate the location and the depth of one of their transmission, is a fiber optic cable. And my question is, do we put a trace wire on our mains?
We do. It's in our standards. We have a ton of mains without any wire on them.
Okay,
So, and that's part of this request. So this will allow us to see infrastructure that we own in the ground that has no locating wire.
okay,
Moreover, the kind of the package, if you will, that we're looking at, all communicate with each other, and they will take those coordinates. So if, you know, for instance, they were on your property and we located a district AC water main 4 feet deep, it will take the GIS coordinates of the depth of that, and it'll push it into our GIS system on mobile MMS.
okay, yeah. Well, it was pretty impressive that
Yeah.
he hooked a device on a wire, and we went 2.5 miles away, and he could get the exact location and the depth of the facility. So,
When we do have wire, we will have that capability. Yes, absolutely. Currently, you have a lot of really talented staff. They take 2 small copper rods and they put them in their hands, and wow, they're really good at it.
I saw an engineer do that on
I do it
the,
all the time.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Some people, I've had staff in the past, they couldn't wear watches. They demagnetize everything. They'd hold those things and they would just like spin around in circles. I'm one of those guys. I can't.
Okay.
Oh, I've seen it work before. too.
I can't. I've tried it. So I would love to be able to do that.
okay, what office are we remodeling?
We,
Upstairs?
at a bare minimum, 1 additional office, but we really need to make some other changes in the building here. So we'd like to finally,
Is there?
Like what?
we'd like to, ideally, we actually connect admin services to where engineering and HR is right now. So we kind of create a much better flow through the office, but also while in the process of doing that, create some additional offices because we're short. So we need some additional office space, but we'd also like to improve the flow and open up some barriers right now. So that's not enough to do all of that. So we're gonna try to do it incrementally.
Okay. But that's in this building as opposed to upstairs over there.
Right.
Okay. All right. Go ahead. Hang on a second, Ralph. Are you at a point where?
Almost.
Almost, okay.
Debt service. The only thing I really want to point out here is on line number 15. The water fund loan. You can see last year's adopted total in the 23-24 was 72,000. If we continued that debt service schedule, we'd have the loan paid off in 2038. So I've upped it a little over 400,000 and I've cut that deficit in half.
How
So
are you able to up it?
because we have some surplus coming in. Remember in the earlier slides, I showed how much money was in the sewer fund, and that part of the rate model was paying that down.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And finally, if we did not increase rates, this kind of shows you where we would be overall in the two different funds. Water would be in the whole 2.8 million, sewer 500,000. So an overall about 2.8 million, 2.9 million if we did not implement the rate increase as of July 16 of this year. And that's at a good breaking point for me.
So what I'm hearing you say is that back in September, when we decided to implement those increases, we did the right thing.
Yes, sir.
Could you say that again, please?
Yes, sir.
No, what it shows is that this July, we did the right thing by accepting the rates for this period.
Well, It's a combination. Remember, the first 3 years are addressing the operating deficit. So yes, sir, on all 3 years.
Well, the reason I make that point is that there's still probably folks that think that we did the wrong thing, and I'm convinced we did the right thing. Okay, Ralph, you had a question?
He wasn't here when we said it.
Oh, just a couple things, we're on, right? Jeff, you were a bit, I don't want to say flippant, but you just went through it real quick. With your pie chart comparison on page 14 between service supplies and salaries and benefits. There's a $2.3 million difference. So that's a lot of money. It's just not, they're close or it's okay. Well, so it's a $2.3 million difference, and that's not chump change. And this needs to be addressed in future corporate hirings and future union contracts. And I'm looking at this from a ratepayer who just had his rates increased 12%.
You're on page 14?
Well, the pie chart, I think it was on page 14 of his
It's actually-
presentation.
It's 15 is.
Or 15, no, that's not it. It's, oh wait, yeah, that is it, yeah. So yeah, that's a $2.3 million difference between salary and service. That being said, okay, I agree with Director Radaman. The hydro policy needs to be developed before it's figured in the budget. That makes sense. Take it out. Make a note. We'll make an amendment on June 19th or something like that, but what? There's no policy. What guidelines does the public have?
We're not adopting the budget today anyway.
Well, I know, but I'm saying June, right? 19th, I think. Well, yeah. So the hydro, you need a policy. I'm sorry. I mean, you have everything else in line. And then how will this budget address the cost of service report 5 years from now? I heard a lot of kicking the can. So what are we doing now that will help us when this comes up 5 years from now? And saying, well, we took care of that project. We took care of that hire. We took care of that equipment of the roller and everything. And the training and all the, keep forgetting the Tyler stuff, all the programming, that is important. And how will this budget address possibly lowering the current cost of service, be it 3, 4, or 5 years from now, during the current increase you have? How is this budget? Are you working on this budget to cut down the public's input, cut down the public's dollar? Is that where this budget's going? Electric vehicles, I'm not even get in a discussion against with it. All I can say now, it's time to be proactive with our governments. Start looking for grants. Start discussing with other rural communities. We're not the only one. And other rural communities across the country, not just California. What are you doing with your electric vehicle? Do you have someone sponsoring these stations? Is your hydropower station powering some of these generators? I mean, it's, I mean, you guys must have been selling the hay and water for the horses when the cars came around and the buggy repair. I mean, there will be a change. Is EV the answer? Maybe, maybe not, but it's certainly a step for helping this world, personally. Anyway, that's it. Thank you.
Okay.
Ralph?
Thank you, Ralph.
We're glad you're here.
If
Any
you'd
other
like to
questions?
Take a break now. We
Yes.
can come back and do CIP and detail.
Yes. So let's break for 6 minutes.
Jeff, how much
Thank you.
All right, Jeff, continue.
Yes, sir. We finished with the operating budget. Now we're going to the capital improvement program budget. As you're aware, about a month or so ago, engineering brought to you the 5-year CIP plan. The projects that are included in this budget proposal are identical to those that were submitted to your board for approval, except for one project. And that's what I added just yesterday. And that is the one in parentheses. In this year's budget, there was $200,000 for the West Point regulator repair and tule removal. That project did not get completed this year, so we needed to roll it over into fiscal year 24-25, and we needed to roll the cash flow over into 24.
When you say West Point regulator repair, what are you referring to?
Damon?
He actually means the honorable.
Okay, that's enough. Thank you.
Okay, we'll change the title of that. There we go.
And when you said, the funds that we didn't spend were just rolled over into this next year.
Right, we have, remember your board adopts a cash flow for the CIP budget. There was no cash flow in this coming year's budget for this project.
Oh,
That was an oversight on my part, so we
moved it to
put that
this
in,
year
yeah.
and added it. Okay.
And that's why this budget that you see in front of you is $200,000 more than the original one that your board adopted back in April. But other than that, we have, the total CIP is just under 25 million, 15.2 million for water, 9.7 for wastewater. These projects are funded by a combination of expansion funds, R&R funds, CIP loans that we locked in at low interest rates, and state and federal grants. We are actively pursuing grant funds, and Michael reported, I believe, back to your board about the grant opportunities we got from federal funding through the Corps. It just got upped recently, so that's really good news. We're working on a grant proposal for the Arnold Secondary Clarifier project. So we are actively pursuing grants. Engineering is working with the company to find grants. So that is high on our list of things to do. I'd rather use, and I can't say free money because there's no such thing as free money, but I'd rather use somebody else's money and pay the small percentage of it to be able to get these projects completed. And here's a pie chart to show you where the money's coming from. On the water side, 65% of it's coming from our CIP loan. And a good portion of that is a Jenny Lynn AB transmission line that is underway. Is that correct, Mark? That project is underway now. And then we have capital R&R funds, a small sliver for expansion funds, and grants. On the wastewater side, 4.5 million from our loans, 2.5 million from grants, R&R, a little under 2 million, and 740,000 out of expansion funds.
And obviously, these are grants that we already have.
Yes, we don't put it in unless we're 100% sure about it.
Jeff, I should have caught this sooner, but something we'll have to talk about between now and bringing this back on the 12th is shifting some funding into this coming fiscal year for Arnold Secondary Clarifier, because we're gonna have expenditures this year on that. And right now, that's all pushed out into the following 2 years. So
Okay.
let's revisit that before we bring this back on the 12th.
Okay.
And I'm gonna ask a question about the cost to serve. So on the, in the rate study model, did we put like X amount of CIP for each year? And if so, is this line up
I need
Close to
to,
that?
yes, we did put money in each for the water and sewer.
a bucket in each year?
Yes, and the majority of those projects were being funded by reserves, loans, and grants, but I will go in and identify them as to, what the
I
funding.
just don't
resources-
want to be doing this and then in year 4, we're going, oh man, we didn't make that. It'd be nice for us to see where we're going. And if it is included in here, then we should be going along with the plan, with the rate, cost of service.
Okay. I can show you the next two slides of all the projects, but it's a lot easier to read it on your handout than it is on these. On the screen.
Going back to that pie chart that shows the CIP loans,
Yes, sir.
9.8 million, 4.5 million. I don't know, the numbers kind of get jumbled up in my head, but didn't those loans that we got, the low interest loans, that was close to 30 million, wasn't it?
Combined, yes.
Combined. Okay,
The
so,
water was right around 20 million and sewer was right around 10.
okay, so this budget assumes that we're going to consume 50% of that money in 24, 25.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So,
And again, it's easy to read on your handouts, the different projects. And we will come back and add some money in this fiscal year for the secondary clarifier. Next is incorporate your comments and any type of direction you have. We're scheduled to come back in front of your board on the 12th to present the proposed budget. This is prelim. There's a few changes, obviously, when the Arnold secondary clarifier. And then the adoption is June 12th, if your board so desires.
The next page on your presentation.
How it matches up to the,
Rate study, is that what I'm
which one
reading?
are you looking at?
I just flipped over
Whoops,
to right here.
there's one. I did,
Right after the next.
yeah, here is,
Yeah,
this is just as district wide.
okay.
And I did a quick comparison to the rate study. It's really, it's not always a one-to-one relationship, the way
Right.
things are set up. But operating revenues, you can see we're up a little bit, 182,000. A big portion of that is the third-party fees we get, the reimbursements. Remember, we charge a fee for people to use our online portal to make payments. We recover about 81% of our expenditures. And the rate revenue for that went up significantly from the budget for this year. It's trending actuals, but that's the big chunk of that coming in for non-operating revenues. And then operating revenues is a combination of other non-operating revenues is a combination of property tax increases and some reimbursements we get for the O'Dowd's Landing fuel break project, 393,000.
Let me
looking
comment on that because you talked about how much it costs us to take these, the third party payments.
Yes.
Interesting, see, so it's.
Part of that
Here's
is
our
what
budget.
we have to pay
Cindy.
to, who's that?
It's a
Business.
Global Pay and Tyler. And right now, we had, last year, we budgeted 33,600 in third-party fees through, I think it was I have end of March on my paperwork, $176,000 in fees. Some of that's our lockbox. So they raised their fees, more people are using it. I'm projecting next year, $259,000
Oh, my.
in costs. 12,000 of that is for our lockbox, our checks, come through the mail. 280,000 is for fees that we pay to Global Pay and to Tyler. And we get about 81% of that back in revenues.
I don't have that slide. Mine is broken down by water and wastewater, so I was looking.
It would be in your green sheets,
In my what?
green sheets.
Okay. But how come I have this one in your presentation? And
Yeah.
it doesn't match yours up there? That,
Or do you have the district one or the water or
I
sewer?
have a,
I'm looking
one
at
for
district wide.
wastewater. And then
I just have the combined up.
you have the combined one, we have. the
Yeah, no,
broken.
you should have the other one later on, I believe.
Okay.
Okay.
That's my last page.
Okay.
Anyhow, I was confused trying to follow you.
It should be before
But I
you get
see.
to CIP.
Before CIP?
Yes, I believe it's slide 27.
Okay. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry, I thought it was the last page.
So we're tracking fairly well on our revenues when we're looking at the rate model, and part of that is by design. I use their numbers on revenues because I don't have enough data to figure out our own, because we're just getting into the consumption side. So variable revenues have not been coming in as much. So we just don't have a history. So I went off of their projections for rate revenue, and we've only a little bit more. I think we got 12 new water connections and maybe 4 or 5 sewer connections this year. So there's not any new, there's not significantly new revenue coming in from new connections.
And that was one of the, that was one of the things that we were bombarded with during the rate hearings, was projecting, you know, large growth.
Yeah.
And it, as we assumed on the safe side, you know, the growth just didn't happen again. You know, and probably will not happen with with interest rates the way they are,
Mhm.
you know. I mean, do we have any subdivisions that really, anybody's working really hard to get them developed?
We do, but none that are big enough to make a real significant impact.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about the 155 houses in Valley Springs?
Not big enough to make a real significant impact. Great to help with.
But they're also not, I
Economy of
mean,
scale.
I don't believe they're pushing that project.
They are,
I mean,
There's
they may
some-
get it,
it'll-
but
it's-
I don't see them.
it's probably, I mean, I don't know a specific timeline, but it's certainly not within a year before they even build the first house. So probably 2 years, and then maybe another 5 years to build out from there, if it goes well.
And
What happened to Copper Cove?
well, they're building onesie twosie in Copper Cove.
That's,
And they have other plans as well, but again, nothing that's gonna make a significant impact, and especially not in the immediate or near term.
because they had projected, what, 135 homes or something like that? Or was that, I don't know where I got that figure.
That was Copper Valley. That
Oh, okay, maybe, yeah.
CB has. Plans, they just kind of prove their,
can you come up?
We need to get a portable mic out.
Teach them to sit in the front row.
Sit in the front row, Ralph.
No, my understanding is CB, they just asked for a 5-year extension on their current Saddle Creek
Yeah.
footprint. So that's in the works, where they'll be able to continue their growth within their footprint of Saddle Creek / Copper Valley. And I think right now they're going to be working on a couple hundred homes. So
Yeah, well, we'll see. They gotta, I mean, you gotta have a buyer for those homes.
Years out, if they happen. And again, I think it's important, I made this comment in the finance committee, you know, it's important to note that new homes and new rates also come with new costs. It's not just new revenue that's available for us, you know, and those are restricted funds, and they come with a cost. So it's great to increase the economy of scale over time, but it isn't just a windfall for us to spend.
Yes, sir.
On the CIP budget for wastewater, Michael, I have a question for you. When he gets it up there, it's actually slide 31. The line in Copper Cove for the tertiary DAF UV improvements, and then
Yeah.
one below it for the pond dam raise. Do the Army Corps see those numbers at budget time? Is that realistic for 24-25, what we got in there?
That's the local share and what is being considered in-kind contributions. So we are spending that money on design, environmental, and some other work that is contributing to our local share of the cost of the overall
So it
project.
has nothing to do with the 13 million that we've
It
got from the
absolutely
Army Corps.
does. Yeah, it does. So
That-
the 13 million is the 75% federal share. We have a 25% local share, and that's what that money is right there.
This money is.
That's part of our
Okay.
local share.
Part of that 13 million will be spent this year also, but it's not in this budget.
It,
ours to
it doesn't, it may be spent, it's a
It doesn't
our fiscal year, probably not. But again, those funds are sitting in Sacramento until the Corps awards a construction contract with that money. And that hopefully will be, hopefully we're on track to do a construction contract by next summer.
So our budget will only include the 25% that we're responsible for in that.
Yes,
20
because
million.
the other funds are not even a pass through. So with grant funds, we would show it in our CIP because it's reimbursed. So we pay the money out, we get reimbursed for it. So it shows up in our CIP. With the Section 219 program, it's not a reimbursement program. So we will pay our 25%, the Corps will pay their 75%, but the Corps awards the construction contract. The money doesn't pass through CCWD.
How do we capture that in CIP projects? How do we capture the value of what we get done? I mean, not that we spend,
Yeah.
we pay money in, is there?
It's a good
It's an accounting transaction. Once the project is complete, it's contributions to capital and it'll increase our fixed assets.
It goes on a balance sheet more than?
Yes,
in
it goes
any-
on the balance sheet.
Okay. That'd be some way of capturing that historically, though, also
Yeah.
in what the CIP program has accomplished. That's big money that we're gonna have $16 million have spent on CCWD project that's never gonna go through our budget and never see our CIP spreadsheets.
But it can certainly be part of the narrative when
Yeah.
we talk about the projects that we do. So just because it's not included in the CIP spreadsheet here, doesn't mean we wouldn't still, use that in the description of the cost of the project and the value of the asset.
Okay, thanks.
Okay,
That's all I have.
that's all you have?
Yes, sir.
You're done talking?
I would hope so.
Where's these green sheets?
Yeah, look at the green sheets. down
Ralph,
there.
come on, let's talk.
She's got them.
Did you want to talk about these?
Try to pick out the most important ones to me. I don't want to spend a lot of time.
I'm just curious if you have any water sales in the future. Selling water
Water, like a water transfer,
transfer.
not in the budget. We wouldn't budget for it unless we were sure that it was going to
Okay,
be.
I haven't gone through it with a fine tooth comb.
No, you will see water sales in the
Okay.
budget, but that doesn't apply to water
I
transfer.
know you mentioned it a year ago, possibly transferring it down.
If we can pull it off, we absolutely will, but
Okay.
we don't budget for it.
Speaking of water sales, Jeff, I saw in the agenda packet that there was a line item called water purchases, $20,000. What did we spend?
That is CPUD. That's the water we buy out of Shads for West Point.
Okay. Very good.
Okay,
Okay, Cindy,
I'm gonna try and make this quick, and Damon, these might be directed to you, because I'm on the green sheets. And I'm going through, just looking at some of the detailed expenses.
What,
And utilities, I really don't have that much. And one of them is because on page 14 of the green sheet for department utilities, what is that? 54? You're $40,000 less in the paved seal asphalt repair. Is that because we're buying equipment, so we don't have to? I'm just, are you sure it's 40,000 less on purpose?
Yes.
Which is a good thing. I'm not.
It's basically through the work that our utility crews is completing
Great.
with the paving machine that they have and with the work our guys are doing
Great.
so they've been running that paving machine?
all the time.
Really?
Yeah. Our utility crew, they're cutting, 24-inch trench pretty much exclusively, sometimes a little bit bigger.
I've got a driveway you might.
I bet.
So do I actually.
Yeah.
Anyhow, thank you for these sheets because it's
Yeah.
giving me the information that I want to see to help me be a little bit more informed. And like looking at your operating fuel and oil, that's holding nicely, you know, consider what we just went through with these large expenses. And you know what, Damon? That was it for you. See, it's
Awesome.
not even hard. Okay, who do I got now? Let's see, so 56, general, management, is that what it is? Michael. So I'm on the green sheets, page 13, safety material and supplies. It's up $30,500. And I'm looking at, this must be district wide, not just for, it's
Yep.
out in the field and stuff. But there's a district EE safety training, $20,000. Is that something new that we haven't done, that particular program? Then,
It should be routine safety training district-wide. I don't
I'm
know if
just-
there's any additional that.
you know,
There
it's
was something
been
additional
such,
this year, but I think the ICS training is, we budgeted some for that in addition to what we normally budget for.
well, I'm looking at history real quick though, and you know, we're like at a $900, 441, and it was probably somewhere else. Then we jumped to 4,800, 12,000. Now with today, we're going to 42,500. So that's kind of, I'm wondering why.
Yeah, well, some of the training used to be in operations.
Yeah.
So maybe that's it.
So
It's a
we,
different
at
spot.
one
Okay.
point, we did shift some of that expenditure to HR, which is in general
Which is the
management,
GM, okay.
rather
And-
than
I
operation, where
did
it was
go
in
to
other
utilities.
parts. Right, so it is
Perfect.
district wide.
Okay, so that's why it looks so off in the trending.
Right, this, the
Okay,
safety
yes.
risks in the GM department are paper cuts, so.
So safety,
not-
this just might be you. So, well, it's nice to have somebody different for a change, you guys. So, same department, recruiting, we're up 13,250. And one of the biggest thing I see is we have advertising for 22,000. And I'm wondering how many jobs we anticipate to come up with that number to advertise for. So I think we're getting
I think it was
better, right?
more based on historical, we continue to see a lot of turnover. Yeah, hopefully it will go down, but the cost of the recruitments go up as well. And so that's, I think we've under budgeted pretty regularly in the past. And so we're trying to make sure it's accurate this year.
Like it's up 13,000. Do you have anything to add on to that?
Nope, that's right.
No words. Okay, the outside legal fees look good. They're down $5,000. Yay. Okay, so I'm on professional services. And we have $166,300, proposed. And I see a salary survey in here for 60,000. Is that something we need to do?
I think that's low.
I'm looking at my board members. Do we need to do another, salary schedule survey right now?
But that's in preparation for
Negotiation.
negotiations
And
that
when are
will
those?
start in January of 2026.
And then who will you bring that to the board to determine who, because I wasn't part of the last salary survey and I'd like to make
It
sure
will
that.
be a huge effort. The board will be involved, the union will be involved. I think that number is low, if anything. Yeah, it will be. a
And those aren't
significant
things that we can do in-house to save some money?
Not
Not a
exclusively.
salary.
No,
We
we
had
will do a
long
lot of work.
Conversation about that. That was 10 years ago though. I
Uh-huh.
think we started that. And
Well,
I think it was at least 2 years before we even,
not
got
quite that
any-
long ago. It was, so when I started here in February of 2019, the salary survey had been underway for 18 months, I think, or a year,
Yeah,
a year.
2018.
And it took us another 6 months to complete it. This one will not take us that long. Well, I'm determined. But it is a significant undertaking. There will be a lot of staff work associated with it, but we also need some outside assistance.
So can we stay at 60,000? But it's still a lot.
There's a lot of
We have to,
factors that go into
I
it.
think that's low.
Is it a bilateral decision on the comparators?
Bilateral.
Hmm?
Yeah, that's mutual agreement.
Okay.
But did we look and see what the cost of the COF salary survey was?
Oh, right.
Last time,
right.
yes,
yeah.
I think I increased it. can't remember what it was, but I increased it.
Okay.
But when you're doing some RFPs, say that that's your max and hold it, and I'm sure somebody will do a good for that. That's all. Um, so the other thing, the next page under training, I see some additional, training for external affairs manager, and I think he's doing really, really good. So is there some specific training that you're budgeting for that I'm just kind of curious about? Because he is doing really, really good. It's $6,500 for external affairs manager training.
I think that's probably carried from when it was in admin services, but it is flexible once it's in the general management budget. But we really want to make sure we've tried, I know in engineering, we increased the training budget as well. I want to make sure our people have access to to those opportunities, especially for people like our external affairs manager, who does a phenomenal job. You're right.
Yeah.
But he is new to that role, and there's some components that I think would assist him. So no, nothing. I don't recall. Maybe we had something specific in mind. I'd have to go back.
When
and
he
look at
from
it,
last
but-
year.
And it would also include Aqua, and I don't know, Mountain Counties, what other,
Yeah.
Well, there's other trainings in here. We have regular meetings, conferences, Aqua, Washington DC,
Right, that-
Calpella,
yeah.
HR. That's a lot of them in there. It's just this one has been noted as his. So like I said, I think he's doing a great job. And I was wondering what program that he might be going into. with
Go back
this.
and I'd have to go back and talk to him about if we had something specific in mind there. I just want to make sure we have enough, we're
Well-
creating opportunity for him to continue to grow in that position.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
perfect.
and
Mhm.
Director Cicada, that line item is training, conferences, and travel.
Yeah, okay, so there's.
So it does include Aqua, it includes any of the other conferences he'll attend, and that's kind of what we ballpark for training and conferences and so forth,
Okay.
especially if he attends two Aquas a year.
And then right above that section, the membership dues, I see a lot of the good ones, CSDA, Aqua, CSDA again, and so forth. But I don't see, and it's probably not in this section, IRWM?
That's would
And
be
then
more
another-
resources.
Water resource.
Oh, gotcha, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where it is, okay. All right, that was it, thank you. And, I don't have anything on the board.
Oh,
Well, I kind of do. Under the benefits, that should only be for 4 board members, right? Or The
we
cost of
look
benefits.
at that by each board member. We do it by
It should only
plan
be
and by
4,
board
'cause I
member.
don't have the big one anyway. Okay. I am at engineering. So on engineering, on the first page, materials and supplies, you're $6,200 less. And it's like the trend is low, low, and then it jumps up, and then low, jumps up, low, now again. So in materials and supplies, you have like plotter, paper, ink, drafting supplies, and 1,500. Is that enough?
Let me answer your first comment.
Okay.
Last year, instead of putting a laptop and other computer related costs in computer admin technology, it was put in materials and supplies. That's why you see that spike up in the prior year, and plotter paper and everything else.
Yeah, we recently acquired a engineering plotters, a full scale
Mhm.
lots. And so this is just for supplies, ink and paper.
But I just thought it was a little low. That's
We're
why I
not, we
was
don't,
wondering, is
we
that
don't do a
correct?
lot of production here. It's more of the occasional, we need a printout of this, and that, yeah. Should
And there's-
suffice.
Okay, thank you. There's also in red, it says IT needs to budget for the new inspector, and there's zeros in red. What's that mean?
That sounds like a carryover. We
Yeah.
don't have a new
It
inspector.
has a
this year.
zero, so it could just
Yeah,
go.
yes.
Okay. And then, okay, so going down to admin technologies, the laptop placements there, 1,500, we're still $2,000 less than previous,
Yeah.
good. But I'm wondering, tablets with cell service for 7,500, why do we need those if they have cell phones and laptops?
These are for field construction activities, so.
Can I ask a question? What are we doing right now? Where did these pieces of paper come from and why aren't the rest of us equipped with them, or at least have it up here so we
That's
can have a group conversation? This is a one-on-one conversation that we're having.
more granular level of detail than
Right.
we normally
Yeah, I know what it
include in the
is.
board presentation.
Was it from the?
I have to ask for it, and I'm the one that asks for this stuff and nobody else does. And when I do, sometimes I get people looking at me like my other board members going, do you need that? I need it. I like
Oh, no,
it.
no,
I'm fine with
I-
answering the question. I think it would, I mean, we could probably sit down and go through it rather than take up time here.
I'm just curious what we're doing. I mean,
Up to the board.
I didn't have any idea where it came from or why it was part of our meeting. No, continue on, Cindy.
Will you hand that down? That's the smaller version. I printed these myself so I could see them, but that's the green sheets there. That I wanted to know how they arrived at a particular dollar amount for the line item. So I get to drill down on all the little detail. And I got some of this the last meeting, but it was so small and they gave me an updated one Tuesday or Monday or Tuesday. Anyhow, so you think they need these tablets as well? as
Yeah,
their cell
basically,
phone?
the way it's been done is you would take field notes, handwrite them,
Mhm,
and you would take pictures with your cell phone these days.
mhm.
Then you come back to the office and put them into the system. By taking the tablet out there, you pretty much put it in the system automatically. You're not duplicating work.
Okay, and then maybe they're a little bit bigger to see.
Yeah.
And the telephone's more for.
And it has the
telephone.
program in there to document things.
Okay. All right, so the big things with the engineering on me are the computer licenses, the maintenance contracts, and professional services. So, for instance, the computer license and maintenance, you're looking at increasing that budget $15,000 for a total of $32,000. And you're looking at Ursa, AutoCAD, and on a couple of them, I want to know how you use those. I'm not familiar with it. So the water sewer modeling software, and it replaces a particular in Obese or something. How does that department use that particular software?
Sometimes we have difficulties in delivering water to a location or putting in a new system. So you model it as part of your design effort. So you go in there and you plan it out and figure out what the sizing of your pumps, pipes would need to be in order to meet the.
And so
service
that helps you do that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So it's a mathematical model.
Okay. And that's a annual fee to have that.
It's, yeah, everything's moving to cloud-based.
Yeah,
And
you
so
can't
you
buy
just don't buy the
anything
CDs anymore. You go to cloud.
So
and use it.
none of this is desktop type software.
It's not
anymore?
tied to your desktop at all.
That's too
It's,
bad.
like I said, it's just. yeah.
And if you don't have any internet, then what? You know what I mean? What do you do?
Well, the water modeling work would be more centralized. That's not necessarily something you're building out in the field. I mean, you would use it out there, but yeah, it's more of a centralized effort.
You know, I talk about maintenance contracts a lot, computer licenses. And I've even asked about, with your AutoCAD, and it looks like you guys have done a audit to see how many really need it. And I know you've worked on that, so thank you. Okay, so professional services. So these, I really want some, like the structural engineering support, non-CIP. I don't know what you do with that. That's a professional service. Give me an example of how you would use somebody outsource that.
Well, it's for professional, it's a licensed structural engineer. It's for non-project specific, whatever the need is. Let's say if it's non-CIP, we wouldn't charge it to a CIP, but if there's something that needs to be analyzed, that is an operational, support kind of thing, we would hire that services. It's not necessarily, it's just more of a hold rather than that.
Yeah, I know you guys are all talented and certified, so I don't know, are these things that you guys could do? I mean,
Well,
I
not
guess that's why I'm trying to
necessarily,
find out why you guys can't do it
So,
instead of we have to outsource it.
for example, we hire structural engineers and geotechnical engineers, like last year, at our Wallace water treatment plant. We have a lot of settling and foundation issues there. We need to bring a structural engineer and look at that. That's not a project specific thing, but we do use these people, our
But-
treatment plant operator, we got a structural problem here. There's unusual cracking in the rebar and that type of stuff. We go look at it. It's something we need to bring a structural engineer in and bring them in.
And they're more specialized in that particular problem or issue.
they're
That's what the
licensed.
explanation I was looking for.
Right.
Okay, so, same thing with the electrical engineering, something like that, a little bit
Correct.
different, non-specific.
These are all
to what we
licensed
do.
professional for that
Okay.
field.
And then the land surveying, that's okay. Okay, here's the one that I stand out is the water wastewater ordinance. You want to hire that out for $100,000. And I'm wondering, I would imagine a lot of staff use the ordinance because that tells you kind of what you can and can't do, what we charge a customer, what we don't. Those are your rules, if you will.
Mhm.
So in doing the ordinance, when I asked about it last week, it said it's been years since you've done it. But can you like give me at least 10 items, or let's go 5 items, 3 items that you know are wrong, that need updated? And before that, I mean, and wouldn't you kind of already know the solution, and couldn't you folks do that in-house and save some money?
So this is a kind of legal document. We don't specialize in legal documents, so that's one part. We have definitely given input. For the 6 of 1984, all the descriptions of units and everything are all correct on there. You know, it doesn't match any of our policies in there. So I mean, there's a lot of stuff that needs to be changed in there. Plus, you know, we gotta modernize it to kind of deal, you know, what other agencies have. It's more described to actually the kind of facilities we have out there. I mean, the thing just needs to be completely overall. We tried to make some, I know when Bob Godwin was here, we tried to make some revisions to it. They were just basically, you know, updating it just to like
Wordsmithing it. basically.
wordsmithing it and making it a more modern document, but it really needs a full overhaul. It's gonna be specialized in that.
If I could weigh in on that, it seems to me that if you've identified the deficiencies and the outdated characteristics, couldn't you just go through and make some notes in the margin and hand your comments to this consultant?
Well, it would be interactive, definitely. I wouldn't necessarily hand it over to consultants, say, come back when you're done, because it will be
Okay.
interactive with engineering staff.
How did you arrive at $100,000?
It's a placeholder.
So then that.
What if it's 35?
Well, that's when we'll,
But see, I go through this because I'm trying, you know, part of our cost of service was to bring our operations,
right.
you know, to a whole. So if we're putting placeholders and they're less, what does that mean at the end of the fiscal year? If it's there, or so if it's there, we can use it. And I don't want it there as extra if we don't have to use it. Because I'd like to see any of the extra money that we don't spend go to CIP, which I think is what we all know is really important. And so I would rather seeing these numbers, not so much a placeholder, but, you know, did you call 3 different people or whatever the magic number is for this dollar amount of a contract to get an idea of what that would cost?
So the previous master plans we did, the next line item, there were
Yeah, those are-
$110,000 for Commonwealth, and so that was what back in 2018. So the price has gone up for insurance services. So that's kind of what we blamed on the 150,000.
For those as well.
Yes.
And you'll definitely go out to bid.
Yeah, so we will get you know, competitive quotes on each of those work efforts. And if we can come in under, we'll absolutely try to do that. And it will be, as Mark mentioned, you know, we'll provide as much of the work as, you know, as we can ourselves. And then, you know, if there is, you know, if we come in low and we can make an adjustment at mid-year, or, you know, we provide that in the report out at end of year, it contributes to the fund balance, which helps fund the CIP in the end.
Yes, and may I also add something? In addition to this work, remember, they have $25 million worth of CIP projects that they're managing as well. So we have a lot of competing needs there, and right now there's only 3 engineers.
And hopefully we'll get another one real soon. But, you know, I'm trying, like, you know, at some point, I think our operating budget needs to get to a place where, okay, this is it, you know, it's more like this instead of jumping all the time. Because if we can find what that normal operating budget is within, you know, each year 5% or whatever that is, and that holds steady, I think it'll be better for rate stabilization as we go forward as well, to where it's not such a 22% increase. You know, I would like to see this be able to stay at that 5%. That would be awesome. So, but if we keep doing placeholders and then we're using the money somewhere else, are we going to really be able to identify that, you know, as one-time purchases and stuff like that, you know where I'm going? So when I'm looking at here, I'm just trying to pick out anywhere I can to save a little bit of money. So that's why I was looking at those.
Yeah, and that's really the work that we do in developing this is going through line by line multiple times to make sure that we're trying, that we're being as cost effective as possible before we even deliver the presentation on the preliminary budget. And for an item like that, I mean, I have to rely on the expertise of our engineering department to come up with the best estimate that we can until we have a specific quote to define what, more closely what that exact dollar amount will be. I would love it to be a steady, predictable budget. And we're trying, we try to establish that, but a lot of this, we don't have control over the costs or necessarily even what the expenditures are. So there's only so much of that we can control.
Yeah, and if I may follow up on that, there are certain things where you are going to see peaks and valleys when we have one-time projects. The urban water management plan is supposed to be coming up. We're going to start that next year. Is that correct?
Yep.
So that's done every 5 years. So you're going to find things that come up every 5 years that are going to call peaks and valleys. But what we try to do is point those out as one-time costs, like the master plan updates for Up the Pass. Those are one-time costs that we won't need to do for quite some time. When was the last time we updated?
And I hear what you're saying. That all makes sense. And so it must be obvious that the master plan for Arnold and Evans Pass, it's that time to do it. You're not choosing to do it because this is a good time. It's because
No,
you have to,
it's actually,
correct?
it's overdue.
Okay.
They were done in
Fine.
2005, so
Okay.
we're dealing with a.
So then my question with the ordinance, you've been not doing that since when? And then why is this year the right year for it when we're doing?
I just saw the need and I just put it in the budget because we do have to address it.
Kind of wish list, even though it needs to be
Well,
done.
no, hold on. That wasn't just Mark's idea. It came from the engineering committee that's been asking for this for quite some time, the overhaul, especially of our wastewater, especially the wastewater ordinance. So that one in particular was a commitment we made to the engineering committee that we would bring this back. And I think it makes sense to do water and wastewater at the same time. But it's going to be a significant undertaking.
And my other question is, all these things were included in the cost of service study.
I mean, not to that level of detail, but the
Well, you had roughly
cost,
six
the
hundred
line
and
item.
$25,000 in the rate cost of service
Yeah,
to
so
do these things.
I mean, I think at some point we really need to get away from comparing that level of detail in a budget to the cost of service. The cost of service 5-year financial plan is not a budget. And at some point we really need to, we definitely need to track and track our progress compared to a 5-year financial plan, but it's not a line by line, was this
Okay.
expenditure included in the 5-year financial
So
plan?
$625,000 included in our 5-year financial plan.
I'd have to go back and look at what we included in engineering for, for each fiscal year to do that. But I don't, I think the point is that overall, the expenditure or the revenue that we need to meet the expenditures is what we're going to track and what is what needs to match up.
Well,
But
that's important to me, so I'll
Right.
either say cost of service, and if it means to be on the financial plan for 5 years, just correct me like you did, and I'll say is it in that 5-year plan. Not the same thing, but it is kind of the same thing. You knew it was on your radar and you have it in that 5-year financial plan, which sort of will roll up into the cost of service at some point.
so this year's professional services budget in engineering is higher than a normal year for engineering. So I would expect a deviation there, but that doesn't mean it's going to stay at that level. Next year, I would expect it to come back down. But, but over time, it should, either it will track with what the projections were or it won't. And yeah, we will report back on that.
So the last one for engineering on the page 18 under training conference, the UCD project management course. Can you tell me just briefly what that is and who takes it? Is it all staff have to take that?
Yeah, I've taken it. So. Yeah, no, it's a 18 unit class that you take through there, UC Davis online, and provides your certificate in project management when you're done.
And $11,220 is like
That's
a
for the
week
whole
course
class. I don't think
or a
that'd be all.
semester.
That was for the whole course, so some of that might roll over to the next fiscal year.
And that's for one employee, you to get your certification.
Yeah, some other employees took classes. I know Sam took one of the classes in the course too. So I mean, it's,
And this is to maintain the certification that you need for here, right?
It's not necessarily a required certification. We're certainly going to benefit from him having that certification though, but let's make sure, let's follow up on that though, and only budget the expenditure we need for this year. If some of that is going to be for a following year, let's make sure we track that.
Move it or something. And how often do you have to do that? Annually or just every 3 years or something?
It's just an
No,
18-unit
it's
class.
yes, the 6 classes you take. So there's 1 or 2 each quarter. So
So once you
2
take it,
year
you're done, you have that certification.
program.
And it comes with a PhD.
As long as it benefits us. Okay, thank you. That was what I needed. So, the admin services. I'm looking at the admin technologies. So for the email cloud backup and the file backup. Do we need an email backup? I mean, is it all separate? I'm looking at roughly $20,000.
Yes, it is
So-
separate. We went through with Dylan and individual departments, fine tuned all our requirements and pared it down. It's actually going to be less than prior years of what we're spending.
I mean, I do show that it's down, so I'm just kind of looking at security
Sure.
portion of it.
Oh, it is. I mean, security is our highest priority.
And then the next page, 19. My comment and all the maintenance contracts, we're looking at $144,000. Some of these, well, a lot of them are for Tyler. When we
Yeah.
get the Tyler all done, I'm assuming Springbrook will go away.
Yes,
That's 18,000 and we're
Right.
still on task, I think, to try and have that done by the end of this calendar year. Is that
the
right?
majority of the finance, yes.
Mhm. Is there?
Everything else that you see,
Mhm.
Director Cicada under Tyler, that's an ongoing cost.
Okay, it's just Springbrook would go away. That's 18,000 anyway. Okay, thank you. And all right, so water resources. Yeah. Well,
Trial. Here you go.
Just,
well,
oh, I know, but
this is my last stuff.
let's finish with you first.
Hi. So I'm looking again at outside legal services. There is, it's up $100,000. Legal support services. Is that having to do with our
Water rights is a big.
water rights? And that's
Well, there's some high level stuff going on.
high level stuff going on. So that's why it's 100,000 higher than previous years. It's kind of like a one-time.
And I think we
thing.
under budgeted this year. Part of it was shifting some costs from professional services to legal that were crossed last year.
And then down in professional services, are some of those going to be, some of those costs in professional services going to be reimbursed? For
Not-
license support?
We don't have a commitment to that yet.
So at this point, it's not showing as
Not
any
reimbursed.
reimbursement. Okay. And I found the one at IRWM. That's it. Thank you very much.
That was easy. Thank you, Michael.
Yes.
Anybody have
Okay.
questions for me?
Ralph, you had a comment? You're limited to 30 seconds, Ralph.
I'm just wondering if CCWD has a ransomware process to deal with ransomware. Do you have that?
We do.
You do? Okay, thank you.
And if I may follow up on that?
Yeah, thank you.
And Director Adaman is the perfect person to discuss this. Aqua JPIA provides us with cybersecurity insurance. We have to meet a certain level of a checklist of the items that we have before to be able to even qualify for that. Is that correct, Director
Yes,
Adaman?
yes, and they've also hired 2 vendors that are working in the background and checking out our system and every other members of the JPIA system as well. And we have not been contacted yet, which is a good sign. Had we been contacted, that would mean that we need to do something further to harden our system to keep them out.
Thank you.
All right. Jeff, thank you very much. And I expect that with the couple of modifications that we had discussed here, that there'll be some minor tweaking when we see this on the 12th.
That is correct.
Okay, so we can, I'm going to ask a question that the answer should be obvious, but we can trust that this has been done in the most professional, detailed, exacting methodology that's possible.
That is correct.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing it again on the 12th. Any other questions? Okay, how about our general manager's report?
I gave a very long report at the board meeting last week, so I just want to express gratitude. There's a lot of different hands that went into this. Jeff, thank you for the fantastic presentation again. Kelly Richards had a huge hand, and I shouldn't start naming names because department heads, everybody, a lot of work goes into this. Scott online and his Kamiko online too. Ide Bailey has been a huge help. I think the new format and presentation is really helpful. So just thank you everybody for the hard work that goes into the budget every year, and to the board for taking a close look at it and the thoughtful questions.
Is that the end of your report?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Good job.
That's a record. Okay,
Oh, stop.
board members, I should note that Director Underhill had a graduation ceremony to attend, and that's why she kind of snuck out of here early. Grandson was graduating, so anyway, I asked her if it was her graduation, and she said no, a grandson. So okay, other board reports, information, future agenda items. Go ahead.
I got one, just real quick, next week, the Mountain County's having a reception in Renegade Winery in Moke Hill, 5 to 7. All are welcome. We're all members of Mountain County, so it's, I think they're serving pizza, flatbread pizza that night, wine and beer. Please come on over, 5 to 7, join us. We know we're having our meeting the following morning here in the, we couldn't find a room, or it was too expensive to rent a room in Moke Hill. So we're doing it here at the boardroom on 9 o'clock on the 7th.
What day is the Renegade?
The reception will be Thursday, the 6th, and our meeting will be in this room, 9 a.m. on the 7th. Mountain Counties is coming to town.
Yeah.
That's all I got.
Nothing? You have anything else?
I want to thank staff for giving me all the information that I requested. I appreciate that, and taking the time to chat with me, and you all did a wonderful job, so thank you.
Okay, I have nothing to report. Want to remind you that our next meeting will be June 12th. The meeting after that will be June 26th. And we didn't have a closed session today. Maybe we
Yeah.
should. So.
We're doing something right.
Are you gonna report it?
No, I'm not going to report on. No reportable action. Okay, unless there are objections, this meeting is adjourned
Nice.
at exactly 4 o'clock, I think, or what is it, 3:30, 3:33?
Yeah. You're here, right?